Hello, and welcome back to What's the Plan? The podcast where we dive into the matters of our careers in the architecture and urban planning field. I'm Hayley.
And I'm Andrea. So Hayley, what's the plan this week?
This week's plan is all about our educational journey starting with high school. Andrea, do you think you felt prepared for university after high school?
Initial thoughts, yes and no. Yes, in the sense that I was prepared in core academic courses, but I think everything or anything design related, I was pretty much learning in first year university as I was going. Yeah. So just some context is we attended a high school in a predominantly middle class area of the Greater Toronto area, and they had a very strong focus on academic success. So during the 4 years we were there, it was rated one of the top 5 high schools in Ontario by the Simon Fraser Institute, which is based on EQA results of standardized grade 9 math and grade 10 English.
Yeah, so one of the main focuses of our specific high school, it was very STEM-based. There is a specific term that our high school and our general area of the GTA used called the Asian Six-Pack, which is where you take the 3 maths that are offered, which is advanced functions, calculus, and statistics, along with the 3 sciences offered, which is chemistry, biology, and physics. So as you can tell, these are the core STEM courses that you need to get into a field and career in the STEM industry. And so what this meant is that unless you are constantly achieving the highest grades within these STEM-based classes, you weren't necessarily seen as a successful student.
Yeah, and not only if you weren't even, they don't even consider your success based on how well you're doing those courses, but the idea that you weren't even taking those courses is be why? What are you doing? What do you plan to do with your life?
Yeah, the fact that I know some of my friends that didn't take any of these classes, the first question they would be asked is, so what are you getting into? Why?
Yeah, and with that being said, because there was such a heavy priority on these 6 courses, whether or sciences and maths, there were a limited amount of courses available for anyone else that wanted to go into a different field, specifically in design and arts. So the summer before grade 10 started, I attended summer school so I can just finish a bird course in the summer to make room for another regular class during the school year, and geared towards university requirements. And during that summer school, I learned that a high school nearby offers a course called architecture, and I was like, what? I want to become an architect, so why is my school not offering this course to me? The closest thing our high school has was a class called tech design, which is basically woodshop. So the ideas of orthographic drawings and learning how to use AutoCAD was briefly touched upon for, I think, probably only a week each, but anything more that you want to learn about architecture had to be self-taught. Yeah, and because there was little focus spent on the arts, the art department, there was only one course for every grade. So say you want to become you want to go into graphic design, there was no course for graphic design. There was only one general arts course that everyone had to take this one course to kind of satisfy their university requirements. So therefore, the projects that came out of those courses were quite restrictive in making a portfolio geared to a specific, design field. So, because of that, I had to go on my own and join a private art studio just so I can, build my own portfolio.
Yeah, and not only were there not a lot of arts-based courses offered, but there weren't a lot of courses or classes offered that focused on the environment, for example. And so for someone who went into the Faculty of Environment, I felt like I didn't know a lot about what there was. I felt like going into university, I learned so much more about the environment than I had known in my past 18 years of life. But I do wonder, do you think the interest in science and math-based classes came first, or do you think the need of our high school's desire to offer them came first?
I feel a lot of it has to do with the parents, Because
Okay,
usually, like,
yeah.
it's parents that are advocating for the kids that, like, we need this course for my kid because I think that's what my kid wants.
For sure.
But a lot of times, like, your kid doesn't necessarily want to do it. They're only doing it to appease their parents.
You're right.
And I feel like I do know a lot of people that, like, thought they were going to do, like, take the Asian six-pack because their parents wanted them to do it. But in the end, like, they didn't really want to. So
You're
it's,
right.
like, I feel like it's a lot of, like, parents pressuring students, parents pressuring, like, schools to offer these courses. And there's not enough parents that are supporting, like, the arts or the environment to, like, push forward.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like now that you mention it, I am one of those students who felt pressured to take 2 of the sciences. But if you listen to the first episode, you would know that I am not a good science or math student. And so why I chose to take these courses was definitely not out of interest or even knowledge. It was because I felt pressured. But the funny thing is, I don't think I felt pressured by my parents. I felt pressured by the parents of other students.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I felt like if I didn't take these classes, the parents of my friends wouldn't want me hanging around their kids anymore because they would think that I'm not smart enough. They should be hanging out with more educated students. And I don't know, do you, like, have you felt the same way?
Yeah, I feel like in addition to us being, like, located in pretty much, like, a middle-class environment, it was, where we grew up was predominantly, like, immigrant families.
Right,
and a lot of times, immigrant families, they sacrifice a lot of things for their children to grow up here. And because of that, I think they place a lot of, like, significance or idea that, like, taking something in English or sciences would be able to set you up for a stable career. Whereas, like, if you pursue something in the arts or environment or something that's much more niche, there's a less of an opportunity for you to make stable money. And, like, obviously their main concern is, like, making money. So because of that, I feel like there is not a lot of, like, significant or priority for that at school.
Yeah, I think based on that, like, how success was defined in our high school and in the general area that we live in is whether or not you have a good career in the sense that you'll earn a lot of money, and happiness and interest and, like, understanding and knowing your interest and knowing that you're happy is definitely, it's not even considered when you talk about success.
Yeah, and I think, like, the default answer is, like, when you don't know what you want to do, a lot of times you see those students at our high school just taking those math and sciences courses. Yeah, and not thinking, like, there might be other opportunities elsewhere if you maybe take, like, a business course.
Yeah, or, like, something that you're truly interested in.
Yeah.
So I feel like as a high school student, when I was in high school, I sacrificed a lot of my own interest in classes that I would have wanted to take for these specific courses. And I think that also came with the mindset that if you didn't attend a good university, like one of the top 10 universities in, like, the province or even Canada or anywhere, that I wouldn't be seen as successful. And so I think that really showed with even the teachers that taught the courses in high school.
Yeah, like, not only, like, the courses were kind of very geared towards engineering, like, sciences, like doctor, med, that kind of, like, industry or field. Like, there were courses that were taught that's supposed to be, like, general physics course, but then because the prof that taught it, or the teacher that taught it, wanted to set up their students for success in the engineering fields, like, anyone that took that course were pretty much, like, required to perform at the same level as engineers. Like, physics is a requirement to get into architecture, and that's understandable. However, I don't need to know the same knowledge of, like, like, I don't know, robotics or mechatronic engineers or, like, electrical, like, I don't need to know that same level of detail. So it was quite frustrating when one singular teacher out of all of, like, the 4 physics teacher decided to do their own thing and teach at a much, like, stricter level and harder level. And he wasn't very quite understanding that for people that were not trying to get into engineering. So that was quite frustrating because, like, yes, although he did end up preparing me for, like, my first 2 years of physics requirements at university, it was it was not enjoyable, and it made me like quite upset that like I was struggling so much in high school, even though I didn't need to be. And it was just creating sort of like a toxic environment where like I felt like I wasn't successful, even though I was only comparing myself to a small class sample. And it got so bad that like by the end of the semester, more than half our class dropped.
Wow.
Yeah, whereas like other classes only maybe like 20% dropped. So like that was quite frustrating and not like a fun place to be.
Yeah, so did you end up dropping the physics class, or?
No, I ended up completing like my grade 11 physics class with him. But when I was signing up for grade 12 physics and I happened to have him again, I like immediately left his class. I'm like,
Wow.
I'm not doing this again, because like not only it was like tough for me like academically, but it was just like mentally difficult to deal with.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like that expectation that you need to perform and succeed at a university level when you're not even there yet.
Yeah. And like the things they were teaching us were not necessarily the same as everybody else. So it's like, why are you singling out the maybe like 20 kids in your class?
Wow.
Like if the school decides this is something they want to do, I feel like they should better do this with like have all the other teachers do this as well, rather than just one prof or one teacher. Yeah. So like clearly the grades in one teacher's class were much lower than like the other ones that weren't as like strict or teaching things out of like beyond their level.
Yeah, and then I guess that goes back to like the pressure of, are you successful? Are you a successful student? Like having that comparison of you're both taking the same grade physics class, but you have different teachers and you're not doing as well as someone else in the other class. I guess that must make you feel like inadequate.
For me, it was like more frustrating because I knew the circumstances, and then because it was out of my control, which like made things worse. Yeah. And the only thing I could do to solve this was to leave his class.
Well, I'm glad you're able to make that decision to leave though, and like you were able to put yourself first.
Yeah.
That's really good. So I guess it's clear that with our I guess education, our high school did do a pretty good job in preparing us in terms of, I guess, creating like study habits, making sure we understand how intense
university maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Prepares for the workload essentially.
Do you have any thoughts on the social aspect? Do you think the social culture of high school prepared you for the social culture of university?
I feel like in both situations, in high school and university, I think your social life is what you make it. If you don't participate, you obviously miss out on a lot of opportunities.
For sure.
And you may miss out on meeting new friends. So I think like both of us were quite involved in high school, and I think that because we were so involved and we enjoyed being like on clubs and like in the band, we like participating in different aspects of like school life, not beyond academics. I think we were able to kind of also push ourselves out of our comfort zone in university and participate in like extracurricular activities.
Actually, for me,
what about you?
I think it was a little different for me.
Really?
I think in high school I was so involved, and I just felt like it was so much easier to be involved because in high school, like, you have these set classes and everyone is in the same building for 8 hours a day. Yeah. That it was easier to make connections than when I moved on to university. Like, I felt like the fact that being involved didn't come as easily to me right off the bat made me insecure, and it made me feel like maybe being involved isn't for me. And so that actually pushed me back into my shell.
Really?
Yeah. In university, like you said, like, it is what you make it. So if you don't go out of your way to find clubs and find these activities to join, you're not going to be a part of it. And I think that really hit me during my first year, because like these activities and these clubs didn't come find me, like come to my specific buildings that my courses were in to find me. Whereas back in high school, because everything was in the same building, it was so much easier to fall upon the different activities available.
Yeah, like there's like daily announcements saying like this club is looking for people.
Exactly. Yeah. which I think that's something that was a big change for me because of how active I was in high school. The fact that my first few years of university, I was so inactive, it felt almost like I didn't know who I was anymore.
Yeah, but how do you think the transition of like being super active in high school to like not being active in university kind of like affected your time management skills?
Yeah, I feel like that it affected me a lot. You would think that now that I don't have as much of a focus on my extracurriculars, I would have so much more time for my studies. But I felt like because I was so used to balancing my workload so well, the fact that I didn't have to focus on any extracurriculars made me think that I had too much time to spend on my studies, which in turn made me spend not as much time on my studies because I felt like it doesn't make sense. Why am I spending so much time on my studies? So then that actually increased my procrastination and made it so much worse. What about you though? So were you involved like straight off the bat during your first year of university?
Well, like, okay, before we even go to university, like looking back in my high school schedule, I don't even know how I managed to survive like 4 years of high school.
Okay.
Because like pretty much all through 4 years, I like slept for like 6 hours a night.
Yes, exactly.
Every day. So it was like whether it was because I had to be at school early before the school day started, so I can like go to practice, whether it's for like band or for sports, or like stay after in the evenings, or even just like outside of school, I was participating in a lot of extracurricular activities. So that required like travel time and all that kind of stuff. So like I wouldn't be home until like 10 or 11 almost every week. So it's like I don't know how I managed to like stay sane during that time. So yeah, like especially in grade 10 to 12 at school, I was like on 4 sports teams this season. I was like juggling band practice, athletic councils, like I was playing club volleyball and that kind of stuff. And like I think going through all that definitely helped me with like knowing how to manage my time between like the various courses in university. But I feel like even though I was so prepared in knowing how to manage my time so I can get in schoolwork, it didn't really prepare me for how much time like doing architecture homework would take.
Okay.
And like how much time would I actually truly need to be dedicating for like schoolwork.
Right.
So yeah, like before we dive into like her actual like workload and school experiences, how did you choose Waterloo? Why did you end up at Waterloo?
Yeah, interesting question. Interesting. If you listen to the first episode, you would know that the planning program that I went into at Waterloo was actually my last choice of all of the programs that I applied for. And the reason why I chose planning was because I happened to know someone who was in the program that was a few years older, and she gave me the insight on the program and the school and all of that. And that is the reason why I applied to Waterloo's planning. I didn't even apply to any of the other planning programs that other schools offered. I think it was during my first year of university that I even knew that planning was offered at Ryerson and all of that. But a reason why I chose Waterloo was because it was a place that my brother would visit quite often. And so with that, I felt more comfortable going there because I knew that I would see my brother quite frequently. And that made it an easier school to choose. But what about you, Andrea? Why did you choose Ryerson?
So, in a way, I technically didn't choose Ryerson.
Okay.
And I feel like how I ended up there is like quite serendipitous. I think I say serendipitous in the sense that like Ryerson was never my first choice.
Okay.
And but now having gone there, I can't really imagine myself having gone anywhere else. And like I don't think I've ever talked about this much since like grade 12, but for the longest time my dream school was actually to go to Waterloo's architecture program. And come to think about it, I think the only reason why that was my dream school, it was because it was the only program that I knew much about.
Okay.
Or heard much about, because I knew like a couple of people that went there. Like before even like deciding which school I wanted to apply to, like I knew I wanted to study at an accredited program in Ontario. Like I didn't want to leave home or leave far from home. So the only options there were like Waterloo, Ryerson, and Carleton.
Okay.
And Carleton being in Ottawa, I thought that was just a little too far for me and too like unknown. So I still applied there knowing that like it's not going to be like one of my top choices. So yeah, like out of those three options, like Waterloo's architecture program, I would say is the most like prestigious in all of Canada because it is one of the older architecture schools.
Right.
Like it's been around for at least like 40-50 years, so it's had a lot more time to like build a reputation. And along with that, like they have a guaranteed co-op program where like everybody that enters or applies, if you get in, like you get co-op for sure. As well as Waterloo was the only campus tour I went on. So because of that, I got a chance to see their building, and it was like a beautiful like heritage building right on the Grand River. So like just the setting was really nice. So like that kind of drew me in. And another factor was like the 4th year Rome semester.
Oh, okay.
So at the Waterloo program, when you're in, I think, first semester or either second semester of your 4th year, you get to spend a semester in Rome. So like your whole class goes and all that kind of stuff. So like those are definitely like enticing factors that drew me in.
Yeah,
but at the same time, those are the only things I knew about like any really architecture programs in Ontario. Like, so yeah, like because of that, I had convinced myself like this is the place I want to be. And like as you figured out, I didn't go to Waterloo. In fact, I was not accepted, and I didn't even qualify for an interview. So like, because I didn't qualify for an interview, I had enough time to kind of like jump ships and like change my plan and be like, okay, I have to figure out another place to go and where I want to go. And then because of that, I like jumped ships and like I focused all my attention onto Ryerson.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was my second choice, and luckily everything worked out. I got an interview, I got accepted, and yeah, and like looking back at it now, like I didn't know anything about Ryerson. In fact, the first time I actually went to Ryerson was for my interview.
Wow.
And like, you know me, like I am a very like geographically like knowledgeable person.
Yeah.
So like despite having lived in the GTA and like having like visited downtown pretty much like all my life, I had no idea where Ryerson was located.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so like I've heard from friends, like from friends with older siblings that attended Ryerson, that like, oh, like Ryerson's just right by like the Eden Center, like the biggest mall pretty much in all of Ontario. And I was like, I've gone to Eden Center several times, but I never knew where Ryerson was. Or like I never really noticed it. So it's like, yeah, like even on the first day of, or the first time I went there on my interview, like I didn't know where it was because I pretty much slept the entire car ride down. So when I woke up, I was so disoriented, and the only thing I knew was just this building. This one building I saw, but nothing else around it.
Wow.
Yeah, but like with that being said, I think one of the best aspects of Ryerson is like being located in the heart of downtown.
Yeah.
So you have everything at your fingertips, whether it's like the industry or like several like resources. Like everything is just at a stone throw away.
So I guess you don't regret going.
No,
I
don't regret it. I feel like things happen for a reason. And yeah, like I can't see myself having gone to Waterloo now. Like I cannot imagine that. Like,
yeah, for sure.
My life would have been totally different, and I might have hated myself for that.
Yeah, I think going back to you saying that Ryerson's architecture program is an accredited program.
Yeah.
That is the same thing with Waterloo's planning program.
Yeah.
It's an accredited program as well, which means that the both of us, having studied at these specific programs, we are able to continue our journeys into the career without any like other steps needed. So for me, I can go straight into a planning profession and start preparing to become a registered professional planner. While for you,
yeah, that's a little different, because for mine, even though it's accredited, architecture, it's undergrad is considered a pre-professional degree.
right?
So we would need to do a master's, which then will be considered a professional degree, and then I could like do my hours and my exams and then become licensed. So it is a step, and that it's not necessarily a step that everyone needs to take, but I think it makes your master's a lot easier, and it provides you a lot more opportunities to for masters as well.
Right, because you already have like the base knowledge,
Yeah.
and everything is more focused. So let's talk about like actually the structure of your program. So how would you describe Ryerson's architecture program?
You hear this a lot from especially like people that are working in the industry that when you hire a Ryerson grad, you're hiring someone that knows what they're doing.
Okay.
And like they have the actual like knowledge and like technical skills to build something. So like this notion, I think, of like Ryerson being more of a technical school kind of comes from like the roots or like the beginnings of our school. Like prior to becoming a university, Ryerson was actually considered a polytechnic. So because of that, our program, our curriculum has like a strong like base in like learning like teachable career skills.
Right.
And then over the years, with the introduction of like being an accredited program, you introduce like theory and philosophy because those aspects are pretty important to learning about design and like the history of design. So yeah, like the program definitely prepares you for the workforce, and not only for design but also for like project management and building science. So I think overall the curriculum is quite balanced, and it's not it's not, it might be heavier on like the practical side, but overall I think it's like a great like learning place.
Yeah, I think it's the same for Waterloo's planning program as well. I feel like we had a really good balance between a theoretical education and a practical education, in the sense that we definitely did learn a lot of the theory behind planning, but we were also immersed in like hands-on planning industry and experiences. So because of the co-op program as well, we were able to have a step into the actual work industry to get a taste of what that's like. And the courses that were offered were also very practical in the sense that we get to learn what it's like to actually work as a planning professional. However, I would say that a lot of the courses that were offered at Waterloo were more focused around the private sector of planning over the public sector, at least early on, which it was a little difficult in the sense that from pretty early on, a lot of people would have already decided that they wanted to go into the private sector because through our education, that's mostly what we were exposed to. And when the later years came around and the courses started to revolve more around the public sector, it was easy to tell which students were not as interested and didn't pay as much attention because they just knew that they didn't want to go into the public sector. So I mean, although the courses offered were pretty balanced, I think that it would have been a little better if we were more introduced to
both at the same time.
So like not everyone, like, I mean, it's obviously it's good if you're able to figure out early on what you want to do with your education, but not being exposed to it gave a lot of students the disadvantage of not knowing that that's something that they want to go into.
So you mentioned like co-op helped you with the practical skills and kind of figuring out what you want to know. Like, how did your co-op work? Because Ryerson also offers co-op, but the way it's organized is much different than Waterloo, where you guys are like 4 months at a time potentially.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, like tell me, how was it working during co-op?
So co-op for Waterloo planning is how it works is that after the first 2 years of schooling, we start alternating 4 months at a time between co-op internships and school. So it'd be 4 months on, 4 months off. And so what this meant was that we would get to work 4 months at a time at various locations, various jobs, and they can either be planning related or very broad and very unrelated. So they can be either planning related or they can just have similar aspects to what a planning job would look like. So what this means is that you can either work for some type of firm because there are planning firms, and so you would learn technical skills where you can relate back into the planning field, or as I mentioned earlier, like the public sector jobs, so any type of government job would qualify for your co-op job because you get to understand what it's like to work in the public sector. And so for me personally, I took co-op as an opportunity to both try and see if I like the planning industry and if it's right for me. Because again, as I mentioned in the past, I didn't know if I liked planning. Going into the program, I wasn't sure what it was. So for someone like me, these co-op opportunities were a really good opportunity for me to explore my possible career paths in the future. So I took the opportunity to take jobs that were more in line with my interests outside of planning. So for example, I'm super passionate about public transportation, and so I took co-op positions with transit agencies, and I think that was a great opportunity for me to get to work with my passions. But then it was also a really good opportunity for me to realize that that's not necessarily something I do want to work in for the rest of my life. And I do believe that working in the planning industry is what's right for me. So the fact that we were able to be exposed to these various placements were really good for people like me who didn't know what they wanted to do with their education. But I know for you, your co-op sequences were a little different.
Yeah, it was a lot different in the sense that co-op is not available to everyone.
Okay.
So, yeah, like I know like Waterloo, where co-op at Ryerson is earned, and it's only available for like the top 30 to 40% of the class. So my year, it was about like 32 people that made it into co-op. As well, rather than being like 4 months at a time, our co-op took place 16 months in a row.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so it was like, it's 16 months between your third and your fourth years of studies, and this includes like your two summers that kind of sandwiches between your 8 months of like school year that you also take off. Yeah, so I think this program structure of like having 16 months in a row is really beneficial, especially being in the architecture industry where like a lot of your projects takes months to complete. So if you're only at like at a place for about 4 months at a time, you don't really get to deep dive into a project. At the same time, your employers might not even trust you to do a lot of stuff because like onboarding takes about, I don't know, 2 weeks to a month, and then by the time you're finished onboarding, you only have about like 3 to 2 months of real actual work time. So like that 16 months allows the opportunity to get into a project much deeper. And I do have some friends that did commit 16 months up front to a single firm. But the common thing that a lot of people do is like they would divide their times 8 months at one firm and 8 months in another.
Okay.
Which is still like 8 months is still ample time to get into a project. So yeah, like I think that's like a pretty good like way also of trying to figure out what you want to do.
Yeah, for sure.
Because a lot of times people would spend like 8 months at a big firm and 8 months at a smaller firm, or like 8 months working in different like typologies, just to figure out what they want to do in the future. And yeah, I think overall co-op is a great opportunity.
Yeah.
And I was very happy that I was able to experience that. But yeah, like that being said, if you don't make it into co-op or don't have co-op, you can also like take time off of school to work, which a lot of people that I know, they didn't make it into co-op. They just took the year off to at the same time as us and just found their own job to kind of experience it before like continuing and finishing school. Yeah.
I think the fact that the co-op programs at both of our schools were so different. But it's really cool that even though they were so different, it's very clear that both co-op programs have their own benefits. Such as a really big benefit that I see based on the co-op program that you had was the fact that you could get fully immersed in the in your job. Because that is true. I felt like when I was in my 4-month internship, right when I started to get a hang of things and really get the groove on how projects work, it was time for me to leave and wrap up. And it was more like, that's it? That's all I get?
Yeah.
Whereas for you,
There's more.
Yeah, you got to see like projects through. But again, like a benefit of the co-op program at Waterloo is that because they're broken up into these chunks, you get to like experience various different types of companies you want to work for.
Yeah, like it's less, I guess, less rushed to always having to find a new placement, like for if you want to do 4 months within, like if you want to split your 16 months into like 4 different terms, whereas like yours, like there's like a breather or a time. Yeah, that being said, like how did you find, I guess, the teacher-student relationship? Were you able to like get a lot of guidance from your professors at your school or in your program?
Yeah, so I think that as I mentioned earlier, like a lot of the courses, at least in the earlier years, were more focused around like the private sector. I feel like a lot of the professors had more of a bias towards gearing the students to go towards a private sector profession. But there were like some professors and some advisors who would say, maybe that's not for you, maybe you want to explore the private sector. I felt like the professors that I had were very helpful in guiding us, figuring out what's right for us. That is, if you took the time to go up to your professor and actually ask them.
Yeah.
What about you? Did you have any advisors or professors that you really were able to talk to?
Yeah, I feel like the unique thing about architecture programs is that like you have this experience of studio. And with studio is like there is one prof to the max probably of 16 students. So because of that, you're able to get to know one prof every semester quite well.
Right.
And you're able to build a rapport with that. And sometimes these relationships can extend beyond that semester, so they continue becoming your advisors. So I found myself like less going to the actual like designated academic advisor of our program, and more so actually going to our specific profs that we like and talking to them for advice or for like we want help on this or assistance and stuff like that. So I think that was quite helpful as well. Like a lot of these professors, they have pretty much their doors open all the time, and like they're all located in this one part of the same building as us. So it's pretty easy. Like if we're on the 4th floor, we have something, a struggle that we're dealing with, we can like go down to the 3rd floor to see if they're in their office and like to talk to them. So I think in that sense it was quite easy.
Right.
And it's less scarier than like in lecture settings in other programs where like you have 100 students to one prof. You're obviously a lot more intimidated to approach them.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, like the studio setting made things a lot easier. Yeah.
So with that studio setting, like did you find that your specific studio group, like you were able to form friendships easier that way as well?
Yeah, so like, okay, looking back on like everyone's relationships and how they built their friendships within the architecture program, I think a lot of it goes back to first year.
Okay.
So pretty much everyone that are like their closest friends, I find are the same people that they met in first semester of studio.
Okay.
Yeah, so because of that, like first year it was quite cliquey because a lot of people were just like sticking within their own studio groups. They don't really know other people, or like they're shy to like hang out with other people.
Yeah.
But over time, like you kind of, as you like develop a stronger relationship with those that you like survived studio with, you're also able to like kind of like mingle and like talk to other people. And I think at Ryerson we have 3 student groups, and these 3 student groups do a really good job of like hosting social events to allow students to not only like get to know other people within your year, but also getting to know people in the years above. And like one of the greatest thing is like one of the student groups, they would host a mentor session or a mentorship program, whereas like people in 1st and 2nd year would get paired out with someone in 3rd or 4th year, and they would be your mentor for the year. So if you have any assistance or have any questions about how to do things or what to do, or like you need someone to help like create your design and your prof is not available, you have this mentor that you can contact.
Wow.
Yeah, and also like that helps you get to know other people older than you, and like it makes things a little less scarier because you can also get to know your mentor's friends.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like what about you? Like how did you like socialize at your program or meet new friends?
Yeah, I feel like similar to your school, we had like a planning student association
Yeah.
that would host a lot of different events that's open to all students that are in Waterloo planning program can attend these events. And so it was a really good chance to like network and mingle and like basically get to know the people that you might be working with in the future. And also like what you said, it makes things a lot less scary.
Yeah.
To know that like the people in your program are like in the end just people. But with that being said, like I did find that my cohort was a little bit competitive in the sense of like what grades we got, what type of projects we would focus on, and even figuring out like what sector of planning we want to go into. I think also with the factor of co-op and landing internships, that provided a really good opportunity for students to show their competitive side, albeit it was a little bit toxic because if you felt that your internship position may not sound as prestigious as someone else's, like it doesn't feel good. So competitiveness was a really big factor within my cohort.
Is that normal for your like planning, or is it just because it was your year? Like, did you know or see similar things happen to in years and like previous to you or after you?
I feel like because I was actually immersed in my cohort, it was a lot more clear how competitive people were. But from insights of people in upper year and just overlooking as like a third party person, the other cohorts didn't seem quite as competitive. But that being said, I wasn't actually in it, so I can't say.
You can't,
But yeah, like it was, I think out of my university experience, that is something that I wish didn't affect me as much as it did. I think if I could realize earlier on that I don't have to be a competitive person in order to feel successful, the fact that my classmates were competitive wouldn't affect me so much.
Yeah, I think for me at Ryerson, like, for sure architecture is a competitive program. Like, everyone wants to do the best and be the best.
Yeah.
However, like, at school, I don't think there was an overly, like, crippling or overpowering sensation that of competitiveness. I think there were obviously some people in my class that were, like, they excelled at pretty much everything they did. But at the same time, a lot of us understood that, like, not everyone excels in architecture. A lot of us struggle. So I think most of us knew that as long as we did our best and we tried our best, it was okay. And that, like, we don't need to compete with everybody else.
Right.
And so knowing that, like, there are people that are naturally talented as us, they serve as like motivational tools to help us do better.
Right.
But it wasn't to make us feel bad, I think. So I think that was a good thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think with that being said though, like there were also specific like students in my cohort that were often viewed as if they were on a pedestal. And I found that was very toxic as well, not only for the people who see them on the pedestal, but these people themselves, because it just puts so much more pressure on them. And like basically it just seems like every step, every move they make,
everyone's watching.
Everyone is watching. And then you have this constant pressure of needing to be good at everything you do. I don't know, like I just feel like the overall culture that creates is very
unhealthy.
It's very unhealthy.
Yeah. I don't know. For us, I feel like it wasn't as competitive because we knew based on like the intensity of a workload, like how people managed them was basically how well people would succeed. I find that the most people that did well naturally, they were able to manage their time very, very efficiently and manage like the intense workload. So like I think off the bat, like in first year, architecture school was very intense. There was a large learning curve basically coming out of high school and going to first year. So in first year, a lot of us like would spend hours in studio, like not sleeping, just so we can complete a deadline. But at the same time, we noticed that people that are in the studio with us aren't necessarily the people that are like the most natural or achieving the best result. It's the people that are actually like ahead of time or able to complete their stuff and don't need to like pull on all-nighters that actually do well. So it's like you kind of understand that like there's some things that you can control of like how well you can do. So I think that helps with the competitiveness and knowing that like everyone's working a lot and their success is based on because of their like actual work ethic.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, so it's like it's easier to be less competitive when you can see how much effort other people are putting in. Whereas I feel like planning, you might be working in isolated places, so you don't understand where everything is coming from and why people are the way they are.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. So with, you mentioned like work ethic, making sure you have like a good work ethics, viewing those who do clearly have a good work ethic can serve as motivation for you to like strive to become better yourself. Do you have any other like maybe tips for people who aren't sure how to do well, that want to do well?
Yeah, so I think first off, when you're entering school, learn how to use the softwares before you start school.
Okay, yeah.
Especially nowadays where like these softwares like Adobe and Rhino and AutoCAD and like Revit, they're easily accessible to people before they start school. That way it makes, once you're in school learning how to design, you don't need to learn how to use the software at the same time you're learning how to design.
So yeah, that's a really good tip.
Yeah, and then like a second one is like, don't leave your presentation physical models to the very last moment. So me being not the greatest at managing my time when it comes to like studio, I often find myself running out of time at the end of every deadline, and I would spend most of my time working my drawings like on the computer and then saving my physical model for the end. And because I save it for the end, I'm always rushing.
Oh no.
Either I'm always rushing so it doesn't look the greatest, or I don't actually get to finish it the way I want because I didn't prioritize it. And because of that, I don't really have a lot of like photos or stuff to show for it.
Yeah, for sure.
So like that's like a one like big regret or tip that I would tell people is like, do your model first and then do your drawings, because I think it's easier to like do your drawings once you have your model done rather than putting your model last. And then the third is just like knowing that like a lot of profs say that when you have 1 hour class, that usually typically equates to like 3 hours of homework. I think take that seriously, especially when it's like for a course like studio. A lot of times you think you don't need to spend as much time working on it, but you actually do, because you don't realize how much work you have until you actually get into designing. Especially since designing is not a very linear process. Right. So like a lot of times things take longer to complete. So I think, yeah, for sure, like don't slack off. Like, yeah, schedule the time and make sure you schedule enough time to actually do things. Yeah. Like, what about you?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest tips that I can give, and I wish I heard early on, is when profs offer office hours, take advantage of them. A lot of the times, no one shows up to office hours, so the profs are just sitting around waiting to talk to someone. And not only will attending these office hours help you get a more clear understanding of what the prof expects from their course, it also helps you build a better reputation and better relationship with a prof, where if anything happens during your semester and you may need a last minute extension, going to your prof to ask for one, it's so much easier for your prof to grant you that extension, because they understand that it's like probably a one-time thing. They don't expect you to slack off, and the fact that they know your name now, it makes it easier for them to sympathize with you. And I think if I had known earlier on, I would have attended all of my office hours. I actually took this tip and put it into action during my last semester. So during my last semester is when I realized how helpful going to office hours actually is. Because at the end of the term, like, all of my profs knew who I was, and if I needed any help, they would offer it, and sending them emails, I didn't have to explain who I was as much. Obviously, they have so many students, so like I still needed to like remind them which class I was in. But once I did that, they knew exactly who I was. And I think another tip that is so important is, once again, there's no need to compare yourself with anyone else.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, like, I mean, everyone learns and grows and experiences things at different times, and that's okay. Like, just because you don't feel like you're as successful as someone else, maybe your definition of success is just different from theirs, and maybe they feel that they're not as successful as you. And everyone's perspective on things is different, and you can't equate yourself to someone else.
Yeah, as long as you're doing your best, I think that's great. That's all you can do. So speaking of talking to profs, another tip that I have is to maintain those relationships.
I agree.
Yeah, so like once you get to know a prof, like I think you should foster that network that you have, because what I realized is like over time, after I get close with one studio professor, after that semester is over, I like stop talking to them and I basically lose that connection. And like years down the road, I realized, oh, maybe I should have kept that because they could have been beneficial for something that I need now.
Yeah. Like maybe they have answers to questions you have,
Yeah.
or they can serve as references or provide recommendation letters.
Yeah, so it's just like maintain your networks, because if you keep building it and if you don't maintain your old ones, it's basically you're still back at zero.
Yeah. Well, I guess those are some good tips to end off on. So I guess that's the plan for now. Remember to listen to our next episode to continue figuring it out with us.
Until then, thanks for tuning in. And remember to check out our Instagram page for what the next plan is.